Grab a cup of tea or listen as you go, ladies. This is your hour with Dr. Zoe, your life and relationship coach. With encouragement, on-point insight, inspiring guests, health tips, and advice, Dr. Zoe helps busy women keep their mind in the game by redefining your superwoman. You're listening to The Dr. Zoe Show. Hi there, I'm Dr. Zoe, and you are a woman who is strong and capable. Sometimes we just have to remind ourselves of that, ladies. If you're listening for this first time, welcome. My show is a live radio show that I also podcast. If you're a woman, you've come to the right place. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, life and relationship coach, and I believe that every woman has a superpower. And my passion is to help you find it, embrace it, and share it with the world. I know that might sound a little hokey or Pollyanna, but I don't care because it is the truth. And it's also why I'm so thrilled to have my guest, Mark Henson, author of a book called Ordinary Superpowers, because it literally backs up everything that I've been saying, feeling, and believing and talking to you guys about. I was like, shoot, when I read this book, he wrote my book. So I guess I'm going to be writing another one. And I am. So for those of you who were listening last week, you may remember that I had a crazy last Tuesday before the show. It seemed that everything that could go wrong did go wrong. And I was sharing with you ladies about how perfect work-life balance doesn't exist in an everyday sense. But it can exist in a total life sense over the course of the seasons in your life if you're able to prioritize it. And that's for another show, prioritizing the seasons of your life. But today, I was smart enough to get up at 4:30. I went to the gym. I avoided all the craziness and I had a nice, quiet morning. I got out all my stress and I sweated it out in the sauna and came back home to love the hectic craziness of my home, my 4 kids, and my dogs, and that feels like balance to me. Ask me on another day, and it'll probably be another story. I'm going to share a little bit about a mom fail at the end of the show today. But when you're having a bad day, just remind yourself of that, even though it doesn't feel like it in the moment. I was telling my son, one of my sons, he was having a really bad day and feeling like the whole world was, horrible and would be forever and ever, as teenagers often feel. And I was telling him the same thing, that you're going to have your good days and you're going to have your bad days. And I just had to remind him that that's what life is about. And if you are able to cherish the good days, because they will come, and then you just have to hunker down and ride out the bad days. And over time, that's a good life. And the good news is that life changes. It never, ever stays the same. And if you can recognize that as a blessing, then you'll be in a good place. So today we're talking to Mark Henson, author of the book, Ordinary Superpowers. Welcome, Mark. Thank you so much for coming to the show.
Thank you so much. When I wrote this book and released it, I started looking for shows to be on, and yours popped to the top of the list, of course, because of what you talk about and how you talk about it. So super thrilled to be on the show with you today.
Great. So tell us, like I said, I talk to women about finding their superpower. So can you tell us, what is your definition of an ordinary superpower and how do you identify it?
Yeah. Well, we all have our talents and abilities and strengths that, we could make a laundry list of all of those things for us every day, things that we're very good at. But I think there are a few things in our life, a few of those talents and abilities and skills that rise above the rest. And I call them ordinary superpowers because very often those things that set us apart, that are very unique about us, we don't always see because they're hardwired into us. It's the way we were built. It's just how we operate every day. So a lot of times we don't even see those really special things about ourselves. So that's why I use the term ordinary superpowers, because to us, they feel ordinary. To everybody else in the world, they admire us for the extraordinariness of them, but to us, they just feel ordinary.
I love that you said that. And even this is something I discovered, and I think I might have shared on the show before, but even as I read your book, it came back to me because one of my superpowers is encouragement and empathy. And
right.
I have never seen that as anything special. I didn't have that amazing, I'm pretty smart, but I didn't have that amazing brilliance of, the researchers who discover, whatever in the world. And I wanted to have that amazing superpower. But what I realized, and you talked in the book about going back to kind of your childhood and noticing those things that you were good at. And I've always been that. I've always been a great encourager. People have always kind of gravitated to me to talk, to share their stories, that whole thing. And once I was able to embrace it as a superpower, then I was able to really harness it and use it to share it, with the world. So yeah.
That's exactly why I wrote this book, is because I wanted people to start recognizing what those things are about themselves, that where they can have the biggest contribution to other people as well as yourself. I mean, when you use that power, it certainly helps you too, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It does.
Yeah. So it's in your powers of empathy and listening and engaging with people in that way, you share that gift with them, and then, that benefits their life, but you also get that nice return on investment there when you use those powers. It may be immediate. It may be, just that really great feeling of, hey, I made a difference. I helped somebody else. It could come back in lots of different ways, even just, karmically later on, I guess,
Sure.
It can come back at you.
Right. But I also know that I'm walking in my purpose. And so
Absolutely.
that makes a whole big difference, because when you feel that you are walking in your purpose and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing in the world, it makes a big difference in your performance overall. It makes a big difference in your self-esteem. So yes, without a doubt. So,
Yeah, I talk about how we admire superheroes so much.
Mm-hmm.
And when I ask people about what is it that we admire about superheroes, I get all kinds of answers from, they're strong, they're powerful, they save the day, they look great in spandex. You get all of those answers. And it comes down to 4 things that I've boiled it down to. And one of those is confidence. When we can embrace our superpowers, it allows us to stand more confidently in what we were built to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's confidence is a huge part of that. You can call it standing in your purpose. There's a lot of different ways you can talk about it.
Okay. And so again, I know we talked a little bit about going back and seeing some of the strengths that you had in childhood, but how can women who are sitting at home feeling like, I don't really feel that there's anything special about me, I don't know what my superpower is, what are ways that they can start to identify it?
Well, I actually have 6 questions that help you reveal your superpowers to yourself,
Mm-hmm.
or to have someone else answer for you, because sometimes that helps to get an outside perspective. Other people can see these things in us that we don't always admit about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But I can throw out as many of these as you want. There are 6 questions which I actually include in the book. One is, if you just ask yourself, what am I always doing? What do I always default to? If I'm in a meeting, or what role at home do I fill? What role in community things do I fill? What types of jobs or activities do I always find myself doing? There's a signal in there. If I'm always doing the same kinds of things over and over, either I'm stuck doing things I don't really want to do, or I'm actually gravitating toward things I'm pretty good at.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean that activity is your superpower, but you're probably using your superpower within that activity.
To do it. Okay.
Another question is, what do people always ask you for help with? When people come to you and they say, gosh, you're so good at fixing technology, or you're so good at listening, or you're so good at crunching numbers, or whatever it happens to be, could you help me with this thing? They're telling you, you're better at that than I am. You're better at that than anybody I know around me right now, and that's why I'm coming to you. So that's a really good signal that somewhere in there may be a superpower for you.
I love that one. And I think that's probably, at least in my life, more of an indicator. I mean, when you look at what are you always doing, I think that it's probably more of what do you always want to do or enjoy doing? Because if you look at a busy supermom, what is she always doing? She's running the kids around. She's taking care of everything, But when you look at what are you always kind of defaulting to, right? When you have maybe nothing to do, or the way that you do things. I love that. But yes, I think that other people identify it so much better than we do. And that's what I've experienced in my life, is people coming to me and saying, you're such a great listener. Can you help me with this problem? Can you talk to these people about this? So yeah, that's great. Okay, go on. Go ahead.
Yeah. And another one of the questions is, what do people admire about you?
Mm-hmm.
And another way to look at that is, what do people compliment you about? What do they thank you for when you perform an activity for them?
Mm-hmm.
So whether that's, wow, thank you so much for listening. Nobody else listens to me like you do, Dr. Zoe.
Mm-hmm.
My superpowers are exploring the new. So any kind of exploration, any kind of brainstorming, like I love to do that kind of stuff. I love to simplify things, and I also communicate through writing. Those are my top 3. So when it comes to brainstorming, if I come up with some idea, people are always complimenting that, saying, gosh, how did you come up with that? I could never do that.
Mm-hmm.
So when you hear those kinds of compliments, take note, because they're telling you something. They're giving you a clue. They will never come out and tell you probably exactly what your superpower is, but they'll hit on the theme.
That makes a lot of sense. And number 4?
Well, I skipped around in my list a little bit because of the way we were talking there.
Right.
But another one is, what do you always feel compelled to volunteer for? So there are 2 things that we always feel compelled to volunteer for. One is because no one else is volunteering and we feel like we have to volunteer out of obligation.
Mm-hmm.
And the other is the one I really want you to pay attention to. And that's when you're in a situation where they're asking for volunteers, whether it's for the work Christmas party, or if it's, if you belong to a church, they're always asking for volunteers for something.
Absolutely.
Or a community organization, they're always asking for volunteers for lots of different things. What are those volunteer opportunities that you want to raise your hand for because you could do it with your hands tied behind your back? That just fits you. You're like, gosh, oh man, that's right up my alley.
Easy, yes.
I always use the example. My wife is a super organized person, and she loves to communicate. She's a communicator for a living. So if we're, say, at the soccer meeting with our kids and they ask, is there anybody here who could organize everybody's emails and maybe blast out an email to everybody once in a while about games and practices? I have to actually hold my wife's arm down because I know she's going to volunteer for it because it just fits her so well, and she knows she could do it with her eyes closed. So that's one thing. For me, if there's a microphone involved, I'll do it all day long. Stick a microphone in my face. I'll make the announcements. I'll do whatever. I'm an old radio guy, so I love that kind of thing. And I don't know, that doesn't always have to do with my superpowers, although communication is a big part of one of my superpowers for sure. So, yeah, that's one of the other questions. Another question is, what do you do that makes a positive difference? I think we always know when we've made a difference. When you've changed someone's day, or you've made a situation better, or you've contributed to a project in a way that no one else could, and you changed the direction of that, or you made it just that little much better. It doesn't have to be grand in scale. I believe every positive difference makes a huge difference, because every positive difference creates a ripple effect. It's nice when we get to throw the rock in the pond and it creates a big splash and a huge ripple. But most of the stuff that we do day in, day out, it's the little rocks in the pond. It's the tiny ripples, but they go a long way. So what do you do that makes a positive difference, either large or small? And then the final question to ask yourself is, what do you enjoy doing most in the whole world? Like, if you had all the time and money, what would that be? What would you do with your time? And aside from the fantasy things about, I'd buy cars and houses and travel to exotic locations, once you got through doing all of that, what would you come back to and say, all right, now that I have all the time and money in the world, how am I going to spend my time? What would I really want to do with that time? There's probably an indicator in there of what you would naturally be really good at doing, what you would really want to do.
So kind of what work even feels the most fulfilling to you?
Yeah. What roles, what activities, like how would you fill up your time in a meaningful way?
I love that one. I'm sitting and thinking too, as you're talking about that, because for me, and this is something I never identified with in my younger years, because when I thought about being a teacher or a coach, it was always like, oh, I don't want to do that. I want to be the one out there doing it. I don't want to be teaching. But as I've gotten older and I've grown into that, I see so much the value of being able to teach. And I'm surprised how the little things that I share that for me feel like that's just common knowledge. Everybody knows that other people are blown away by it.
Right.
So I know that in some ways that's a superpower for me as well.
Well, and you just hit on that idea that when something's a superpower for us, we have this tendency to believe that everybody else has this power too. Yes. Which goes to the whole reason why I feel like we feel like they're ordinary superpowers. But that is not the case. If you were to ask people, like when you have those moments where you think that can't everybody do this, you should ask that out loud. Can't everybody teach like this? Doesn't everybody listen to you like this? Doesn't everybody brainstorm like this? And the answer is no. It's always going to be no. Right. You're more unique than you know, I think, is what most people have been taught along the way to not feel unique, to not feel like they're special, to not feel like they have powers or talents, and to certainly not talk about them if they feel like they have them. We've been beaten down, to say it's not good to brag about yourself. It's not good to talk about, what your powers are, what good things you do in the world. And I think, and then that turns into self-talk too.
Yes, we will be talking about self-talk because it always comes down to self-talk, ladies, right? And I love that statement you made. You are more unique than you know. That is such a powerful truth. So I'm Dr. Zoe Shaw, here with my guest, Mark Henson, and we will be continuing to talk about that title I love so much, Ordinary Superpowers. We'll be back in just a minute. People ask me, how do you have so much energy? I am not a coffee drinker, but I love the benefits of matcha green tea. More antioxidants than coffee and a smooth energy, not the jittery kind that lasts me all day long. Perfect for you supermoms too. I have searched the world over for that perfect matcha for my smoothies, and I have found it at Kiss Me Organics. You can get it too at kissmeorganics.com. Enter the promo code Dr. Zoe, DRZOE, for 10% off and free shipping. Experience the smooth, healthy, organic energy of matcha green tea. KissMeOrganics.com. Hi there, this is Dr. Zoe. We are back with my guest, Mark Henson, and we are talking about ordinary superpowers, a topic I just love so much because I know every woman has a superpower. And we ended talking about Mark's statement that you are more unique than you know. And we just identified ways that you can identify your own superpowers. And you were talking about, Mark, how most people don't recognize them because they feel like, doesn't everybody have that?
Right.
And so once we have come to a place where we've recognized, okay, you know what, this might be something that is unique about me, that comes more easily to me than it does to everybody else. So now what? How do I harness it? How do I share it? What would be the next steps?
Well, that's the whole point, is to not just identify it, but then how do you proactively use these? Our ordinary superpowers are, in a way, kind of like our default operating system. They're what we rely on in a much more reactive way than I would like to see. I would love to see people start to figure out ways to be more proactive about it. So once you've identified what they are, asking those questions that we talked about earlier and figuring out what the themes are, what are those ideas, and then maybe even backing up just a little bit. I think the first step to really stepping into your power is to really clarify what your powers are. So a lot of times people get very specific when they answer the questions that we talked about earlier, and they get down to, wow, I do wicked good spreadsheets or something, and it's like, that may be your power, but really, if you took a step back from that, maybe the power has something to do with why you're so good at that. So maybe you're very good at organizing complex information. I like to keep it up at that level, because at that level, then you can say, where else can I apply that power? If all you think you can do is wicked good spreadsheets, then all you look for are opportunities to do spreadsheets. But if you're really good at organizing complex information, then I can see that in lots of different projects and lots of different roles in my life. I can use it at work, at home, in the communities I belong to. So I think, taking that first step back, go up, another 10,000 feet and look at your powers from that level and say, what is it about these powers that I could apply in other places? That's the first step to take.
I love that. And I wonder if that's sometimes how people do get stuck in their life, because they're thinking, this is the only thing I'm good at is those wicked spreadsheets, when they're not realizing that they could take that superpower that's not just about that and apply it in other places. And sometimes we might feel kind of stagnant, right? Or stuck in our lives. So
Absolutely.
I love that point. And I can, once again, my life, I can definitely see how I have been able to utilize that, going from the couch as a therapist for 17 years and taking it out of the therapy room and figuring out how I can apply my superpowers in a much broader way. So I love that one. Okay.
Right. Another way is to really start communicating about your powers to the people around you. Even though they probably have a good idea of what they are. For instance, on my team at work, obviously I force them to go through this process because
that's great.
It's all, part of what we do, but we're really big on development in my company. And so we went through this whole book and identified all of our superpowers, and we talk about them on a regular basis. And what it does is it allows us to start looking for opportunities for each other, which is really important, to let the people around you support you by feeding you those opportunities to use your powers. But the only way you can do that is if they're really clear about what your powers are. So I have one person on my team who's very, very good at digging for information. Just a phenomenal researcher. But he's my operations manager. You know, like we would have never started funneling him all of these research-oriented projects if we didn't know that that was one of his superpowers. But we discovered that along the way. He loves doing it. So now it doesn't really matter where it falls within our company. If it involves research, we generally pull him in on that because he's so good at doing that. And he loves it. That's the thing about superpowers too, is they totally energize you. They, you know, when you plug somebody in and they get to use their superpowers, they light up. You know, you almost have to rein them in a little bit.
That is so true. So when you are operating in your superpower zone, it energizes you. It doesn't deplete you. And I love that you said that too, because so many people, you know, I had a friend, well, actually a friend of my parents who was a restaurant owner, and he just loved it. And he would spend, 60, 70 million hours a week doing what he did. And people would always tell him, aren't you exhausted? You're doing too much. Why are you so tired? And I remember hearing him say, I never started to feel tired until people always said that to me, but this is what I loved, And when you're doing what you love, of course, it doesn't feel like work and it does energize you. And the other thing I'm thinking about as you're talking about you and your company, right? You being the leader of the company and helping your group, your team identify their superpowers is as a mom and my kids and how powerful it would be if moms can start really thinking about that as they're talking with their kids, helping their kids identify early their strengths and helping them to maximize those.
And being honest about that. I think one of the things, as parents, we have this tendency to want to tell them they're good at everything. We want to build up their self-esteem and bolster that self-confidence and all of that. But when you can really see something special in your kids and you can take a step back and go, is that really special, or am I just being mom or dad here,
right.
And then trying to encourage that. I have one daughter who's just a very good artist, self-taught all the way, like just kind of, if there's any genius in that head, it has something to do with her expressing herself there, because she's taught herself the entire thing and she's amazing.
Yeah.
So I try to encourage that. I'm like, and without telling her what to do, like, how else could you use that? Where else could you do that? Because you seem to really love doing it. And so that's the kind of language I try to use with them is just really nudging them along rather than tell them that they should, I haven't even told her she should go to art school.
Right.
I'm like, art school is a possibility for you, but, there are lots of other ways you can go about using that talent if you really want to, because it's phenomenal. And I think, pointing that out to people, when you see somebody else's superpower too, very important, whether it's your kids or coworkers or the cashier at the checkout at the grocery store, if they have a particular power that really stands out, I think it's a really good idea to encourage that power in other people.
I love that. And you're so right. Best friend Rosie, who was on my first show, I know without a doubt what her superpower is. And she has an ability to connect people. She is a social butterfly. She throws the most amazing parties and she just pulls people together and she's so good at it. And I don't know that she values it, as much as I do and everybody else in the world who sees that in her. And I speak it to her all the time. And she's also just a good friend. But yeah, I really feel that that's so important. And moms and dads do have a sense of, I want to treat all of my kids equally. I don't want to point out those differences, but I think it is so important so that your kids feel unique and understand, and not telling them this is your superpower, but telling them I'm seeing, strength in this area and how can you develop it. I love that aspect.
Using one of the most famous lines from Superhero Land, when Peter Parker's Uncle Ben is dying and he tells Peter, because he recognizes that Peter has something about him. He doesn't know he's Spider-Man yet, but he knows there's something about him. And he says, with great power comes great responsibility.
Yes.
And I think that's that message that you're getting at is, hey, you've got something there, make sure you use that for the power of good somewhere in the world. I don't necessarily believe that you have to, change the world with everything, but there's lots of ways to influence your world in a positive way on the little scale as well.
Right. Just like you said, that whole ripple effect.
Yep.
And so how can you improve on a superpower? And as I talk about this, I think about that story of Michael Jordan right? And we all know, of course, and you even talked about him in the book, obviously he's got those extraordinary superpowers. But
Right.
even going back to when he was in junior high, I believe, or high school, and he was trying to get on the varsity team, and he didn't make the varsity team as a 10th grader because he couldn't dunk. They cut him and he had to go back to like the JV team. That story tells you that despite his extraordinary superpowers, he still had to, number one, believe that he had them, right? Despite rejection.
Right.
And then number two, he had to harness them. He had to work at it.
Yeah, there are several ways to go about that. One is that what you just talked about is what I would consider Michael Jordan's origin story, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's that moment in time where he was faced with something that disrupted his world.
Yeah.
Just like every other superhero in the movies does. There's something that totally disrupts their world and says, your life has got to take a turn here. Whether you like it or not, it's going to take a turn.
Yeah.
And so recognizing that and saying, all right, what am I going to do now? How am I going to use what I have and maximize that? Which I think is what Michael Jordan did. He took a step back and said, I have some powers, but I've had this disrupting experience.
Mm-hmm.
How do I maximize who I am so that I can get where I want to go? And day in, day out, that can look like all kinds of different things where we have setbacks or we have even just a glimmer of opportunity, but it's nothing huge yet. And so one of the other things I mentioned, there were 4 things we really admire about superheroes. Mm-hmm. One of those is that they're always trying to increase, or not trying, but they're always kind of testing and expanding their capacity. And what I mean by that is there's always challenges that arise for a superhero where they don't think they can do it. Oh. And like they don't think they can save the city, or they don't think that they can, lift the giant rock or whatever it happens to be. But they test it. Mm-hmm. And they push themselves and they figure out a way, even though they didn't know at first how to do that. Just like Michael Jordan, he didn't know how to make the varsity team at first. Mm-hmm. So he regrouped and he increased his capacity to where then he could make it. So what are those ways for you? Lots of different ways you can increase your powers. You can always learn. I've never met anybody with a superpower, no matter how clear the superpower is, that couldn't improve on that power. And in the workshops that we do, we always talk about, there are a million ways to learn. There are books. There are other people. There are experts out there you can look up to. There are workshops and seminars. There's lynda.com. There's, there are podcasts like yours that people can listen to on every conceivable topic. So there's no shortage of ways to figure out how to improve yourself and improve your powers.
You are so right. I hadn't even thought about that concept of when you look at all the superhero stories, none of them had that ultimate confidence. It was that I'm not sure I can do this. And the confidence was built in that process of doing, right? And overcoming.
Yes.
That's just great. Yeah. Challenge equals change. Well, thank you. We are going to be right back. We're talking with Mark Henson, author of Ordinary Superpowers. When we come back, we'll get some information on how we can connect with you, Mark, and some of maybe your workshops and other things going on, and how we can get your book. You're listening to the Dr. Zoe Show. See you in just a minute.
People ask me, how do you have so much energy? I am not a coffee drinker, but I love the benefits of matcha green tea. More antioxidants than coffee and a smooth energy, not the jittery kind that lasts me all day long. Perfect for you supermoms too. I have searched the world over for that perfect matcha for my smoothies, and I have found it at Kiss Me Organics. You can get it too at kissmeorganics.com. Enter the promo code Dr. Zoe, DRZOE, for 10% off and free shipping. Experience the smooth, healthy, organic energy of matcha green tea. KissMeOrganics.com.
Hi, this is Dr. Zoe. You are back, or we're back, talking with Mark Henson, author of Ordinary Superpowers. And we've just had a wonderful discussion about how you can identify yours, the importance of strengthening your superpower. And Mark, can you just tell my listeners a little bit about how they can connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can go straight to my website, which is markhenson.me, or you can also go to a superpoweredlife.com. Those both funnel to the same place. Mm-hmm. A superpoweredlife.com is probably easier to remember. And everything is there. My blog is there. The book is there. My speaking and workshops we post up there as well. We do a workshop every quarter called the Superpower Summit in Columbus, Ohio at my other business, which is called Spark Space, which is a really cool retreat space that I own. So those are really fun. We just had our quarterly one on Friday, just a couple days ago.
Your workshop?
Really, really fun. Yeah.
So it's every quarter? Okay.
That's where we really dig into people's superpowers and really get them a lot of clarity around what they are and then how to move forward with those in their lives on a much more proactive, powerful way. So,
oh, that's great. That's great. Definitely something worth checking out. Is that a weekend or?
It's a one day retreat. We keep it all in one day right now. Although we've had requests for multi-day, like this would be really fun to dig in for more than one day. So who knows what we'll do in the next year or so.
That's wonderful. Also, you have an offer for.
Oh, I do. Yeah. I totally forgot to say that. You can download a free chapter of the book, Ordinary Superpowers. And most authors, when they offer a free chapter of a book, they give you the intro, which doesn't really give you much. It maybe gives you the writer's style or whatever.
Right.
I decided I wasn't going to do that. I wanted to give people the real meat. So the 6 questions that we talked about earlier in the show, that's chapter 4. So when you go to my website, either Mark Henson or superpowerlife.com, it doesn't matter. You can get a free chapter of the book, and it's chapter 4, and it walks you through those 6 questions in a lot more detail even than we gave on the show today. And then it also takes you through this quick little 4-part test to really nail down what your superpowers are.
Right. And I'm looking at chapter 4 right now, Discover Your Ordinary Superpowers. And I don't think I mentioned this, but this is one of the few books that this is the only book I've actually been able to read all the way through before my author came, because it's such a great read. It's just so powerful and is very much an easy read. And I love how you give the exercises because, of course, when you're reading a self-help type of book, it's great to hear the stories. It's great to get those ideas, but having clear exercises is so helpful, especially when you're trying to do something like discover your ordinary superpowers. So just love it. Great book. Highly recommend it. So let's talk a little bit about another part that we haven't spoken about at all, and that's the dark side of superpowers.
Yeah, but every superpower has a dark side, I believe. That comes through sometimes overuse. Sometimes it comes through some sort of pendulum effect where if you swing too far one way using your superpowers, you leave some weird void on the other side. Sometimes and so I think we have to be really aware of that.
Yeah, sometimes I call that unintended consequences of even really good things, right?
Right, exactly. For instance, for me, when I brainstorm, I tend to kick into brainstorming mode a lot. And a couple of things happen. First of all, I see people glaze over. So I know I've kind of overdone it with the brainstorming of coming up with ideas. But I've also noticed, like with my team, when I'm in brainstorming mode and they're not, then they start taking my ideas as delegation. And that's really dangerous. They start trying to figure out, how are we going to get all this stuff done? And I'm still in blue sky thinking land over here. So that's the downside or the dark side of my superpower. My operations guy that I mentioned earlier, he's a researcher, and he will dig into research till the cows come home. And so the dark side of his is I have to tell him when to stop,
right?
Because he will go on and on and on to save 10 cents on a granola bar. You know what I mean? It's like you laugh, but we've run into that kind of issue.
I know exactly who you're talking about. I know that personality.
How much time are you going to spend to research? A tiny little difference on a price of something. So, what I've learned there is there's a downside to his superpower. And so I have to react to that. And he's aware of it too. So now he asks me, how much time do you want me to spend on this? Because he'll just do it and keep doing it because it energizes him and he loves doing it. So those are 2 quick examples of downsides that I run into in my own business. The other thing you can mention in here too is there's the dark side, which is all about that sort of flip side of our own superpower. But then there's kryptonite.
Yes.
And that's a whole different thing. So the dark side is within us. Kryptonite is an external force. Like kryptonite in the Superman story is that mineral from his home planet that makes him weak on Earth. And we all have kryptonite that makes us weak on Earth, that makes us weaker than we really want to be. It diminishes our superpower, makes us a less powerful version of ourselves. And that can be stuff. It can be clutter. It can be processes. More often than not, though, it's other people.
Relationships
are our kryptonite. Our relationships. It could be the person that sits next to you at work just drives you nuts. It could be someone in your family that, like, every time you're around them, they drain your energy, and you just don't know how to be your best self. And so when that happens, you're not using your superpowers. You're kind of kicking into survival mode and using all kinds of other things to just try to cope at best, or maybe even retaliate at worst, right? You fight back. So with the downsides or the dark side, you recognize that, and then you take those steps to make sure that you're mitigating that. Like you're stepping back away from it a little bit. You're setting those appropriate boundaries. With kryptonite, it's all about boundaries. All about boundaries. You have to say, how do I either avoid this completely or minimize my exposure as much as I possibly can?
Yes. And I think especially when it comes to relationships, it is often about minimizing exposure and kind of mitigating, that damage, because I'm putting on my therapist, brain hat here, because I suspect highly that most people go about life kind of attracting the kryptonite, if that makes sense. We all have our issues and we all have our strengths and our weaknesses. And we tend to attract sometimes people that will diminish that in our lives. And it's number one, recognizing when we're doing it and how we're doing it. And sometimes it's just about even you and I having this conversation and someone listening and thinking, oh, yeah, I do see how that person in my life always diminishes this, or I do see how that is such a distraction in my life. And so it's about recognizing it. And then, yes, it's about figuring out, how do I set up those boundaries? How do I say no? Sometimes when I need to say no, how do I recognize that issue is about that person and not necessarily about me? But I really love that you identify that, because I think that, and sometimes, like you said, it could be the dark side where you're holding yourself back. And then other times it can be that kryptonite, the people that you allow in your life.
And you can't change kryptonite. That's the whole point.
It exists in the world. It's out there, right?
Right.
Right. You cannot change it. Yeah. I don't know if this was from your book, but I have this written down in my notes. It says, there's nothing so useless as doing efficiently that which shouldn't be done at all.
Right. That's a Peter Drucker quote. Yeah, that I included in the book. Yeah, but absolutely.
I love that, because when we talk about superpower, and just like when you talk about the dark side of it, and you're part of your team, what's his name? The researcher?
Jason.
Yeah, Jason. Yeah. And how Jason can just research and research and research. And I think it comes to that point where you have to recognize that no matter how efficient or well you do something, it has to be useful, right? At some point, there has to be a use for it. And that can sometimes be the dark side. Yeah.
And that's when you mistake your powers for your passion sometimes. Your passions, you'll go all day on that stuff because you love doing it.
Yes.
That doesn't necessarily mean you're being productive. That's what that Peter Drucker quote's all about, is you can be busy and you can keep yourself busy by the stuff that really interests you. But when you look at the test of a power, is it helping somebody else? Is it being productive? Is it contributing in a positive way to society or to your company even, or your team or your spouse or kids? You have to ask yourself those questions.
Yeah. And when I read that, I was like, ouch, because it makes you really look at yourself. And, I'm a busy superwoman. I'm constantly on the go, and I love to write as well. And sometimes I have to ask myself, okay, is this in alignment with my priorities? Is this in alignment with the things that I say that are so important in my life? And that for me determines productivity. And so, because I can just go off on a tangent and just write and feel really productive. And then I realize it's not even furthering my goal. So I think that's a super, super point to make when it comes to working and understanding and walking in your superpower. So thank you so much, Mark. Are there any other last tips that you would give to women out there who are in that place of trying to discover and operate in their superpowers?
Yeah, along with that idea of like, you are more unique than you know. I think the one thing that I always try to tell people is that I feel like we're being taught this message over and over these days that if your life isn't epic and legendary, then you're missing out on something and you're doing it wrong. And I don't think social media helps with that a lot.
Not at all.
There's that whole fear of missing out. But we're just constantly bombarded with that message. And so the message that I try to leave people with is that, you don't have to change the world with a capital THE. You just need to focus on changing your world. And like we've mentioned a couple of times, that little bit at a time makes a big difference. Things don't have to be epic and legendary all the time. And don't feel like if your superpowers don't create that for you, that they're not worth pursuing, because, epic and legendary is just one far end of the scale that we all live on every day in life. We live in the rest of the scale 99.9% of the time.
Absolutely. And epic and legendary isn't even necessarily always productive either.
Exactly.
Love that. Great. So can you tell us one more time, Mark, how my listeners can contact you?
Yes, just go to a superpoweredlife.com, and that's where everything is, including the free chapter. If you just want the free chapter, you want to bypass everything else, you can go to markhenson.me/free chapter, and then you're right there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I highly recommend this book. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate you coming on the show, and best of luck with your book.
Thank you, Dr. Zoe.
This is Dr. Zoe, and we will be back in just a few minutes to address some real talk.
People ask me, how do you have so much energy? I am not a coffee drinker, but I love the benefits of matcha green tea. More antioxidants than coffee and a smooth energy, not the jittery kind that lasts me all day long. Perfect for you supermoms too. I have searched the world over for that perfect matcha for my smoothies, and I have found it at Kiss Me Organics. You can get it too at kissmeorganics.com. Enter the promo code Dr. Zoe, DRZOE, for 10% off and free shipping. Experience the smooth, healthy, organic energy of matcha green tea. KissMeOrganics.com. Hi, this is the Dr. Zoe Show, and this is Dr. Zoe back after a really great discussion with Mark Henson about finding your ordinary superpowers. My takeaways from this show, number one, is you are more unique than you know. I love that because it is so, so true. And I thought it was so great that Mark said, when you see someone else's superpower, encourage them and tell others about yours. And that has to deal with the confidence that you need to have in your uniqueness, owning it and sharing it with the world. So today I wanted to talk about an article I read in Time magazine called The Goddess Myth. It was a really powerful article because it addressed the social pressure on women to be the perfect goddess in the sense of motherhood. And I was just really intrigued when I saw it. The picture was pretty cool, but when I just saw the title, I was like, I have to read that. And, this pressure that we have for our bodies to work perfectly and on demand, produce and deliver our offspring, for women to breastfeed effortlessly and make this seamless switch from being a solo woman to an amazing mother. But the reality is that many of us struggle. We struggle in silence, and many of us compare ourselves to something that doesn't exist. And it's hurting us, and it's hurting our society, and it's hurting our families. And I just really related to this because, especially when it goes back, because this article was mostly about early motherhood. And I'm not in early motherhood anymore. Some of you are, and some of you are past, but it really applies to all stages of motherhood. But I remember when I was a huge breastfeeding proponent, and I still am. But back then it was like do or die when it came to breastfeeding. And when I had my daughter, who's now 11 years old, and she was born with a rare genetic disorder, and she couldn't suck. She had very low muscle tone and just was not able to do it efficiently. And I was so desperate to breastfeed her. And I, pumped and tried. I had spent tons of money on, I don't even remember what they're called, breastfeeding lactation specialists, that's what they're called, on lactation specialists and different types of apparatus and just trying so hard to breastfeed her. And when I wasn't able to, then I pumped for a year, every 4 hours. And that created so much stress in my life. My hair, started to fall out. And I was trying to be something and do something that really wasn't that necessary. And it goes back to that whole comparing myself to, well, I have to be this because this is what a good mom does. And of course, over time that those pressures morph from breastfeeding to other choices, stay at home versus working, and all those hard choices that we women have. And how do we come to terms that there are really no ultimate mother goddesses out there, that we all do have our own superpowers and we also have our deficits? And I think really it's all based on what Mark and I spoke about today, finding and identify your superpower and staying in your lane and knowing that your lane is good enough. And I know that so many women struggle with that, with the whole comparison. And, it's funny because this week I can talk to you about an example of walking outside of my superpower.
Number one, Halloween. I'm so glad Halloween is almost over with all the candy. I swear the truckloads of candy that have come in my house. I'm like, what are we supposed to do with this? We can feed a small actually kill a small nation with all these chemicals. And besides that, just all of the, the pressure with the parties and the costumes. But anyway, I've always felt inadequate regarding holidays because I don't have a homemaking creative cell in my body. I can cook and it tastes delicious, but I've told you guys before that my husband calls my food ugly delights. Is that what he calls them? I think because they taste wonderful, but they look atrocious. It's just that whole art of putting things together and making them beautiful is just not my skill. I have a friend who makes all of her kids' Halloween costumes by hand. And they're not just like simple, they're amazing. She starts months before. And, God bless her. That is her superpower. And that is amazing. But anyway, my daughter, I bought her on Amazon because that's what I do. I buy those costumes. And I needed to hem one of her costumes because it was too long. And I was feeling so ridiculously proud of myself because I took a needle and thread and I hemmed that dress. Feeling like, Martha Stewart, it goes back to that whole, comparison thing. And here's the thing. Not only did my 11-year-old not appreciate the fact that I hemmed it, she took the hem out because that's not how she wanted her dress to look. And I can tell you, I was so angry it wasn't pretty because I was like, I spent so much time because it does take me forever to do things like that. I'm not Martha Stewart. But the lesson learned for me is that, like I said, we have to stay in our lane, but we also have to give the people in our lives what they need from us, not what we need to give them because we feel somehow based on comparing ourselves to somebody else that it's important. Just like, I could have been a much better mom to my baby, not just that baby, Sullivan, who was, newborn, but also my other kids at home. If I had given up that need to breastfeed her and be attached to a pump for an entire year every 4 hours and lose sleep. And that is what I really want you women to recognize is that we all have amazing talents. My daughter doesn't need me to be Martha Stewart. She needs me to be who I am. And your kids and your family and your work and your environment don't need you to be somebody else. They need you to be who you are. Not that I think I shouldn't use a needle and thread once in a while, but I think that you get my point. That is so important to recognize what are my talents and how can I express them? And can I let other people do theirs very well and appreciate it and look at their works of art? And then look at my works of art and recognize that they are just as beautiful. So thank you for tuning in to the Dr. Zoe Show. Tune in next week and every week on Tuesdays from 12 to 1 Pacific, 3 to 4 Eastern at LA Radio Now. For those who can't always listen live, check out reruns of my show on iTunes, Google Play, Libsyn, YouTube, where I am your life and relationship coach. I help sometimes struggling superwomen keep your mind in the game by redefining your superwoman. If you know a friend who may benefit from any of our topics, please spread the love and share my show. And if you like my show, please show me some love with 5 stars, and I'd love a review as well. And you can do that by going on iTunes and scrolling all the way to the bottom. I was trying to figure out how do you do that because people ask me, how do I give you the reviews? I'm like, I don't know. You just go do it. But I figured it out. So you scroll all the way to the bottom and it says write a review. You can connect me at drzoeshaw.com or any of my social medias at the handle Dr. Zoe Shaw. Join my free newsletter and get a free copy of 30-Minute Life Transformation, The Secret to Getting Stuff Done, by texting the word JOIN to 38470. I look forward to speaking with you wonderful ladies on social media after the show. Have a super week.
You've been listening to The Dr. Zoe Show, redefining your superwoman, with your host, Dr. Zoe Shaw. Don't forget to sign up for her monthly newsletters to get encouragement, tips, and skills for keeping your mind in the superwoman game. Connect with her now at www.drzoeshaw.com. Tell your friends and subscribe to her podcast on iTunes. Join us next time for another edition of The Dr. Zoe Show.